So first, how do you argue with the person that is right, and then you need to counter-argue with that person? How do you tell your mind that you're right or convince that person and maybe others that you're in the right? So my guess is, you didn't indicate this in your question, but my guess is you're asking this for a situation where you are assigned to argue a position or basically argue a position you don't agree with or argue against a position that you do agree with. So usually this is done in like a class debate, or even the believing and doubting game that we played in the previous learning unit. That's another situation where you have to kind of articulate strongly a position that you don't necessarily agree with. So here is how I approach that situation. I think of myself as a defense attorney. When I am required to argue a position that is not my actual true position, I don't really reflect on, do I believe this? Or I don't really reflect on trying to convince myself that I now believe this position. I don't think that's necessary. At least it's not necessary for me. What I tell myself is my job is to make the best possible case for this position. It doesn't matter if I agree with it or not. My job is to create the best possible case for this position. That's it. If I am creating counter arguments for someone else's position, I'll come up with the strongest counter arguments for that position, even if it's a position I agree with. For the sake of the activity, I will come up with the strongest counter arguments for that position. And then if I am actually advocating a position that I don't agree with, my position is something else, I will ask myself, what are the strongest arguments I can make for this position, or what are the strongest arguments that can be made for this position? And so I am proud of myself if I articulate those arguments effectively. Don't create a straw person fallacy where I'm like, oh yeah, here's some arguments, but they're like really weak because I want everyone to know that I don't actually believe this. I don't do that, but I do clearly and confidently articulate the strongest cases for that position. So that's what I do. And then the arguments themselves are what are designed to convince the audience of the strength of my position. So at the end of the day, they have to make the decision, and as long as I articulated the strongest arguments, you know, maybe they will side with the position that I articulated. In this sort of scenario, which sometimes we are put in classes where we are asked to argue something that we don't necessarily believe in. All right, so your second question is, how do you deal with the person that is trying to manipulate you? Okay, so as a communication scholar, we know that different contexts and different relationships affect the way that we communicate. And so, for example, interpersonally, let's say I have a friend or a family member who's trying to manipulate me. My response to that is going to be very different than, say, if my supervisor is trying to manipulate me, right? It's going to be different. And those are actual people I know. My response is different to someone I know trying to manipulate me versus like an advertiser or a salesperson or whatever trying to manipulate me. So without knowing a little bit more about the kind of scenario you're imagining, I can't give you a solid answer about how I would approach that specific manipulation. But I will tell you, no matter what the situation is, when you are being manipulated and when I'm being manipulated, one of the first things that I do is I reflect on my boundaries and I reflect on my values. So when we're looking at values, we're looking at things that you hold dearly. So for example, to me, financial security is one of my values. It's very important to me to not be in debt. It's very important to me to be able to pay my bills comfortably, and I have really organized my life around that approach. Live below my means, make smart financial decisions, because that's something that's been very important to me since I was a very young child. Money was very tight at home, and I did not want to reproduce that situation as an adult and the stress that comes with it. So when it comes to big purchases, I might have, let's say I'm buying a new vehicle. Technically, I hold on to vehicles for like a decade, but let's imagine I'm buying a new vehicle and the salesperson is trying to upsell me with a particular package. First off, I've already done my research. I'm not going to go and buy a vehicle without doing a ton of research, comparing prices, figuring out what different packages are available and which ones are worth it and which ones are not based on my needs. But I am always going to reflect back on those values. And so if the salesperson is trying to, upsell me on something that is going to put my financial security in jeopardy, there's absolutely no way they're going to convince me to do that. I think about that too every time I go to a store and they're like Target or whatever. They're like, oh yeah, if you get a Target card, you'll save whatever on your purchase today. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but you're going to screw up my credit score, which is very important to me because I value financial security. And so it's very easy for me to immediately say, no, I'm absolutely not getting that card. It's another attempt to try and manipulate you. And then, boundaries are a thing that are very important to set up too. So you kind of determine your boundaries based on your values. And then also just based on your needs as well. I'm an introvert. I have a very limited amount of energy each day. Once that energy has been used, there is no more. And I need time alone to rest and refill that energy. And so I set a lot of boundaries around my time. So my work week is Monday through Thursday, 6 to 5. If people ask me to do stuff within that time frame, and it is stuff that I can do without going over my hours, if I can help someone out, absolutely I'm going to do it. But when I get asked to do things that are going to make me work beyond my contractual hours, so work for free, things that are going to require me to work Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays, I don't do it, because that's a boundary that I have set up to protect my time and to make sure that I am at my best for my students, for my colleagues, but also for my family and friends as well. And I'm learning this, probably even more importantly than for all of those groups, boundaries that really are a form of self-care for me. Because when I'm at my best, I can help all of the people that I want to help. So that's my advice to you. If you don't already have a list of kind of your own values, and then also boundaries that you have set up, to make sure that you're living your life in a way that you know is the way that you want to and the way you need to, do that first. And when you are faced with those manipulations, you can reflect on both of those things, and those help you respond.